So what exactly is a majority government? And is it even a good thing? Some people believe that majority governments create stability and strong leadership. Others would argue that they concentrate too much power in the hands of one party. And in British politics, debates about majority governments often become especially intense after large election victories. So in this episode of Politics 5, let's explore the advantages and disadvantages of majority governments within the British political system. A majority government happens when one political party wins enough seats in the House of Commons to govern alone. In the UK Parliament, this usually means winning 326 seats or more. Because the governing party controls a majority of MPs, it can normally then pass legislation, survive votes, and implement policy more easily. Now, supporters of majority governments often argue that this creates stability. Governments can make decisions more quickly and avoid constant negotiations with smaller parties. This can be especially important during economic crisis, potential conflict, emergencies, or simply periods requiring long-term planning. Majority governments can also make accountability clearer. If one party governs alone, then voters know exactly who is responsible for the decisions and the outcomes. There is less ambiguity about who to reward or punish at the next election. On the converse, coalitions and minority governments can sometimes struggle to pass legislation if multiple parties disagree constantly, whilst majority governments can usually move policy through Parliament more efficiently. However, critics raise important concerns as well. One major objection is that majority governments can become too powerful. Under the British parliamentary system, a government with a large Commons majority can often dominate Parliament itself, because MPs from the governing party will usually support government legislation. Therefore, critics would argue that scrutiny can weaken when majorities become very large. This sometimes leads to accusations of elective dictatorship, the idea that governments can exercise enormous power between elections once they secure a strong majority. Critics would also point out that majority governments do not always reflect majority public support. Under first past the post, parties can sometimes win large parliamentary majorities without winning more than 50% of the national vote. In fact, this is normally the case. This creates debates about representation and fairness. Others would argue that majority governments may encourage more adversarial politics because one large party can often govern without needing broad consensus across Parliament. Ultimately, whether majority government is seen as a positive or a negative often depends on political perspective and circumstance. Some people would prioritise stability, speed, and decisive government. Others would prioritise consensus, negotiation, and stronger restraint on executive power. And the British system constantly tries to balance these tensions. And that balance becomes especially important during periods of political fragmentation or national crisis. So, in summary, majority governments can provide stability, speed, and clearer accountability. But they can also concentrate significant power in the hands of one governing party. And much of British politics revolves around balancing power between those two competing pressures: effective government on the one side and restraint of power on the other. This has been Politics 5. British politics explained in 5 minutes.